Hi, and welcome to Create Love Arts. My name is Sharon, and today we're going to talk about a Japanese style of crochet called Amigurumi. I know I butchered that. I have been practicing for hours and still cannot quite say it. What it is stuffed toys or creatures. And it is a technique that originated in Japan. And there are a few things that are different about it. It's not difficult. It is something that a beginner can do, but there are some things you need to know before you try. And there are tools and accessories that you should have on hand before you begin a new project. Now, they do sell little kits that you can buy now at the craft stores. And they come inclusive of the yarn that you need, usually the hook and the pattern, and all the tips and tricks. What they don't tell you are certain, and stuffing. They also send you with the fill, which is basically polyfill, or fiber fill, and you can buy different kinds. And those things are really, really cool, and they are a great starting point for new crocheters, mainly because they are almost all single crochet. Not all, but almost all done in single crochet. However, you need to know how to do a few different things for this technique. One of them is you're going to need some hand strength. You might want to get out, start doing some hand exercises because it gets a little tricky after you do it for a little while. In my experience, some people do really well with it. You can use different yarns based on the pattern that you're using. I have never created my own amigurumi pattern. Amigurumi, I don't know how to say it, however you say it. I've not created my own pattern out of this, so I can't exactly show you a full-out pattern on it, but I can give you the tips and tricks that will help make any pattern of a stuffed toy easier, or a creature, or what have you. Now, they do have different sizes of yarns that you can use. You can use any size. It is recommended, though, that you use whatever size the pattern tells you to use if you want it to become the same size as the pattern's end project. So if they tell you to use a sport weight mercerized cotton like this one, that's what you need to use to make that size. If you were to use a worsted weight, which you could do, you can see the different sizes there. This one's thinner, this one's thicker. This is a worsted weight or a number 4, and this is a sport weight, which is a 2 or 3, depending. And if you're going to use a different weight yarn, like this one for a pattern that calls for this one's going to be much bigger at the end. So it can be done. If you want it to be a little bigger, that's great. That's how you would change that. But in order to do that, you would need to change your hook size to match this yarn. But hook size is a little different too. And that's what we're going to get into. The first thing that you need to know, there are about 10 things you need to know, so strap in, folks. But I'm going to try and go through them quickly. The first thing you need to know is when you're doing any kind of project like this, you are going to need to have really good tension, and you're going to pull these stitches tight because you don't want that fill, the fiber fill, to come through the stitches. You don't want them loose and apart from one another. They have to be right up next to one another in order to hide that fill. So that is something you definitely need, is really good tight tension. The other thing you're going to need is a hook size that does not match your yarn, but the pattern. It will match the pattern because in making these kinds of projects, you need to have a really tight stitch. And in order to achieve that, you're going to take this particular yarn calls for a size 3.5 or 3 millimeter. We're going to use a 2.5 millimeter. And if that's not tight enough, we're going to go down to a 2. And the whole point of it is you need those stitches to be tight. The smaller hook will help you achieve that. Same with this one. This one calls for a 5mm hook, and you would use a 3.5mm to achieve the same tightness that you need for this kind of project. So tension, hook size, and you need to keep your stitches tight and even. When you are new, those things can be quite difficult to achieve. I do not discourage you from trying this though, because you never know. If you already crochet quite tightly and don't realize it, this is perfect for you. It will come out better than anything else, because that's the point. You need it to be tight and the stitches to be really close together. So if you find that you've got a death grip on your yarn and your tension is really, really tight, this kind of project, the stuffed creatures and such and toys, are a really good place to start, because it will help you achieve a better looking project. So that's number one. Number two, your stitches. Usually you use single crochet, except for your clothing and accessories. They can use other things. But the creature itself, or the toy itself, almost always uses single crochet stitches, because they are real tight and close together, and it makes it easier to hide the filling. So that's number two. See, we're cruising right along. Now, number three is going to be something that there are two little tricks of the trade here that you need to know: a magic circle and a yarn under. A magic circle is, if you were going to start a project in the round, you would start with a slip knot, and then you would chain whatever amount that they tell you. Oh, this is the wrong hook. You would chain any amount whatever amount they told you, like 2 or 3 or 4. We're going to chain 3. And then what you are going to do is you're going to go into, for your first stitch, you're going to go into that first chain that you made, and you're going to single crochet 6 times. Okay? Now, I want to show you what happens here. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. And you'll also notice that using this smaller hook, you can thread that yarn. You can accidentally split it, and it makes it hard. So you got to be careful with your yarn when you're using these. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so that's how you would start it, and then you would just pull to close. But it still leaves a little gap there. In Amigurumi, you do not want that gap there. So the way to achieve that is to make a magic ring or a magic circle. And they're not difficult to make. You just have to know which order to make them in. And if you are going to make them, you need to make sure that you sew them in really, really well, so they do not come apart, because they are known to do that if you don't do it properly. And you have to make sure that you sew it in. So what you're going to want to do is take your yarn and leave a length. Hold it over your finger like this, and leave a good length behind it. Then I usually use 2 fingers. I grab the working yarn from behind and wrap it over my fingers, and I turn my hand and make an X and hold it. See, there's the X. Then you take your hook and you grab this part and just pull up a loop. Now you carefully and gently take your fingers out. You do not want to pull on this. You want to grab the working yarn like that. So now I have a circle. Don't move this one out of the way. And then you're just going to start chaining. Chain 1 and then make your single crochets. Okay, 1, 2, but you hold that ring. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my working yarn here, grab the tail, and I'm just going to pull. And see what happens? It closes that circle up to almost nothing. Okay? So magic ring is something you will definitely need to learn how to make. There are lots and lots of videos on it. I will show you one more time. 2 fingers, give yourself a nice long length here to pull on and to weave in, because you definitely need to do that. Wrap it around and then around into an X and hold it. Grab your hook and go under that first wrap and grab up the second, turning your hand and pulling your fingers out without losing the loop. Grab your working yarn and make a chain. There's your magic loop or magic circle, however you want to call it. And at the end, you just pull your tail to close it. All right? And it forms almost a knot. The trouble is, if you don't weave that tail in properly, you will be sorry. I've done it. I'm sorry to say it's happened to me, but it's a good learning experience because you're not ever going to do that again. So for this kind of project, a magic circle is important. Also, when you are working a project like this, in making toys or stuffies, one of the main things you need to remember is also to yarn under, okay? So usually when we tell you to pull up a loop, you would go under like this and turn and pull. Or actually here, let's go from here. That's your single. We're gonna do a single crochet here. I'm gonna put see how I'm wrapping the yarn over here? I'm putting my hook over it to pull up that. I'm not going to do that with this. With this, you go under and pull up. It just makes a tighter stitch there. So I'm going to, instead of going around like this, like you normally would, you're going to pop it and pull it up this way. Okay? And then go through. So under, I'm going to pull it under, yarn under is what they call it. So instead of in the pattern seeing yarn over, you might see with a Y-O, you might see a Y-U, yarn under. And that depends on the pattern designer. But you can see what happens with these stitches. They get really tight and close together, and that's what you want for this. So magic circle and yarn under is going to be important for you. You're going to work in a spiral usually. And all that means is a continuous round. Let me get to my 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And another good thing to know about this kind of style is you usually start with 6 stitches and end with 6 stitches. And I'll show you how to do that or what to do at the end there. So I'm just going to close up my loop here if I can still get there we go. Now usually you would slip stitch to the first single crochet of your round. In this, you do not. Usually they'll tell you to either place a marker or PM at the beginning of the round or the end of the round. It depends on the designer. And it's up to you if you would rather just be consistent about it. So if you want to start with a marker at the end of your round, and that'll tell you where your last stitch is, you can do that. Usually you would put it in the first stitch of your round, okay? And what I'm going to do, I pulled my hook out. I'm going to go back and look for that very first loop and make sure that it's part of my stitch there. Yeah, I made these nice and tight. I finally did it right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's my first stitch. I'm going to pop the marker right into that underneath those 2 loops, okay? Right under there. You can also do a running marker. A running stitch marker would be to feed another color of yarn under there, and then as you go, you feed it up and you leave it there the length of your circle or all the way through. Every beginning stitch, you pull it up to the next and pull it through. And that way you know where your beginning is. It'll leave you a nice seam to give you the exact middle of your project. So that's another really good idea. But you're not going to slip stitch this together. When you go on to round 2, again, you start with 6. Round 2 is usually, I don't want to be wrong here, but is usually 2 single crochets in the same stitch. That's called a single crochet increase. I'm going to take this marker out so I can work on it. So my first stitch is here. I'm not going to slip stitch to it. I'm just going to pull up that loop, pull under that loop, and do 1. Oh, yeah, this gets a little tricky when you're not used to doing it all the time. Sorry, folks. 1, and then in the same stitch, I'm going to do another 1. And you're going to do that all the way around to make a nice flat circle. So there's 2 there. Now I'm going to place my marker back in that first one so I don't lose my thing because I didn't bring a scrap of yarn to pull through. Now I have some, I'm just not going to do it. All right, and then you're going to do the same thing here. Put your hook in and pull up and pull under 2 more. 1 and then 2, and you're going to pull under. Okay, so 2 in each stitch, and that'll double up your round. That's what it's going to do. So I'm going to work around a little bit longer, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so when you get around to the next round, I've already started. When you get to this next round, that's my first stitch of the new round. Almost, they should all tell you to increase that very first stitch. So it should look like this, SC, and then a comma, and it'll say INC, or increase, 6 times, so that you end up with 18 stitches. How this stuff works is you double up by 6 every time. So typically it'll be pretty consistent that you'll see INC, increase. So all that means 6 comma INC, all that means is you need, or SC comma INC. You're going to increase in that particular stitch that it tells you. The first one you're going to do, actually that's wrong. The first one you're going to do a single. So SC comma increase would be a single crochet in the first stitch, and then you go to the next, and then you do the increase. INC literally means 2 stitches in the same stitch, okay? So you're going to make 2 single crochets in that 1 stitch. That's an increase. I'm terrible at yarning under, sorry. And then you're going to do it again. A single here by itself. Oh, I did it right. Single here by itself. And then in the next stitch, you're going to increase. So at the end, we started with 6. Next row was 12. This one will be 18. You're going to increase 6 stitches each round. Okay? So that's 1, 2 in this one, I think. Let's double check. Yep. And then back to 1, and then 2 again, and then all the way around. And that's how you're going to begin just about every single one of these. But what you need to remember is when you see this, you're going to see, pardon the shaking. You're going to see your magic ring, 6 single crochets in there. Increase each stitch around. That means 2 in each stitch. And then you'll start seeing single increase, 2 singles and then an increase, 3 singles and then an increase. That is all it means. You're adding 6 to each one of these. If you do the math there, You're doing 6 every single time. And that's how you get a perfectly round and flat circle to begin these with. Usually it's a head that you start with. And again, with the magic ring, if it starts to loosen before you've woven in that end, you just tighten it up and it'll tighten right back up. All right, so increase. Now a decrease is different, and you're gonna find on the other side, when you get to the end, you're gonna have to do, or even in the middle sometimes, you'll have to do decreases. A decrease is different in this than in anything else. If they tell you to place stitch markers, whatever stitch it is, make sure you place them. Usually that's where something special is going to happen later. So you really need stitch markers to work with this. Okay? Or little scraps of yarn that you can leave in there like that. Just a little scrap that you've cut off from another project. As long as you can zip it right in there with your yarn needles and just leave it there. That will help too. Decreases. Now, if I'm starting a decrease, usually, I'll show you, this is what you would normally do for a decrease, is you go in, pull up a loop, go into the next one and pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, and then you yarn over and pull through all 3. That's a normal decrease. But do you see what happens with that? It leaves a hole. It always leaves a hole when you get through, as you go along, especially up here when you get to the next level of it. So instead, they're very clever, these designers. Some of them are so clever. They found a different way to do it. So what you're going to do is only working in the front loop of that stitch that it tells you to, work in the front loop, go from the bottom up with your hook, yarn under and pull up a loop, okay? Then go into the next stitch from the bottom up, yarn under and pull up a 3rd loop. Now you have these 3 loops on your hook. Typically, you would yarn over and pull through all 3 for a decrease. In stuffy making, you don't. You yarn under and pull through, or you can yarn over on this, I think. Pull through 2, leaving 2 loops, yarn under, if you can, and pull through the last 2. That is an invisible decrease. And what will happen is it won't leave a gaping hole where your stuffing can come out. So decreases are a little different. And like I said, I'm just going to pop through these, but I'm going to do it real quick again. I'll do another decrease. Go into the stitch through the front loop only. Okay, just the front loop. Yarn over and pull up a loop through the front loop of the next one that you're decreasing, because that makes 2 stitches into 1. And then you're gonna, I don't know if you yarn over or yarn under, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. And then you yarn under and pull through 2, yarn under and pull through the last 2. And that is your decrease. And again, it gets really tight. Your hands have to be strong to do this. Mine are not. That's why I hesitate to teach this. But what I did was I decreased by 2 stitches there. Those 2 stitches are now decreased and they're back down. So when we're going to close the hole, close the round circle on the other side, that's what you're going to end up doing. Or throughout the pattern when they need you to do a decrease. So yarn over, under, only use the front loops, and then go under the first one and the second one and do pull through 2 and pull through 2 more, like a double, but not a double. It's a decrease. So again, you will also see in patterns for this kind of style is front loop only or back loop only. And they're usually indicated by FLO or BLO, front loop only, back loop only. And those will always be indicated, and you will always do the same thing for them. So if it says SC or BLOSC, that means a single crochet back loop only. And if it's an FLO, that's going to be front loop only. So front loop only would be the front loop here on that loop, and back loop would be this loop back here. Okay? And you can make stitches right in there. And what happens is, like, that'll leave a nice little finished edge there for design purposes. It really does look nice when you do it. And then, so that'll leave the front loop down. And if you do front loop only, that'll leave the back loop down on the other side. So there's usually a reason why they're telling you to do it, but FLO and BLO are usually very important when making these kind of projects. So we're already on tip number 7. I'll probably do headings on this to tell you each tip as it comes. But now we're coming to something that I both love and hate doing. So say we're done, okay? And this was our last stitch here. I'm going to go back to here. And we need to close this off because this is our last one. With this kind of project, you don't want to chain one and weave it in, because you'll leave a lump here at the top, and you don't want that. You want it to be very finished. So what you're going to do when you're doing a project like this is you're going to leave your hook in there. You don't chain anything. This is my very last stitch, exactly how I left it, all right? You're going to cut your yarn for however the length they tell you. Mostly, they'll give you an exact inch amount if it's going to be attached to something else. I'm just going to do a small piece here of like 4 to 6 inches. You're going to cut your working yarn off. Then what you're going to do is you're going to pull your hook out and pull that yarn through. All right, you're going to pull your yarn through just like that. You're going to place it on a yarn needle. I'm going to use the right size so I can make this work. Put it on a yarn needle. And then what you're going to do is you're, first of all, always going to skip that first stitch there. Don't ever do anything there, because we're making a faux loop is what we're doing. So you're going to take this and you're going to put your, insert your needle under both loops of the second stitch. So there's our first stitch. We're going to go under both loops, all right? If you work over this one, you're going to add an additional stitch, and you don't want that. So put your needle through both loops of the second stitch in the row and pull through. And then you're going to thread your tail back through the top of the last stitch you made right here. Oh, through the top of it, sorry. Through the top, straight down, just like this. And then you're going to pull gently. And what's going to happen once you pull gently, oh, I'm going to go under that loop. I wasn't very careful. You pull gently. And when you pull, see what's happening? It's creating a new loop to close it. It's closed. And it's a faux loop. Oh, there we go. It's a fake loop because the other real one is underneath. And then you're going to secure your tail or leave it long if they tell you for joining. So you can either weave it back and forth now along with your magic circle, or if they want you to use it as thread to join the next piece of the puzzle, because that's basically you're putting things together. You're like sewing it together at the end. Then you would leave it like this, take the needle off and put it to the side until you're ready to use it again. So that's called a needle join. And that's all that is. Usually you end in a 6 stitch hole, just like I showed you. And that decrease to close will leave it tighter at the end. And you need to make sure that you're doing that. And then when you're putting it all together, the pieces joining together, you're going to use a whip stitch. A whip stitch is a sewing term. I never really understood them until I started doing a few of these. You're going to use the front loops only on the piece that's being joined. So say I'm taking this piece and joining it to another finished piece. Okay. On this piece, I'm only going to use the front loop. I'm only going to use these front loops to sew them in. You're going to line them up with the next piece, and then you're going to use this needle and put it through the front loop only and pull it through. And then when you get to the next piece that your corresponding piece would go on to, then you're going to go through both the corresponding whole single crochet. You're going to go through both loops on that one. But on the piece that you're joining to the other piece, the new piece, you're only going to use the front loop only, and then you're going to join on both, through both on the other side. Okay? And that's basically a whip stitch. You want to make sure that you line them all up very carefully and that you don't miss or skip any. To work, you got to work through each stitch or it will not look finished. It won't have that seamless finish that they go for on those. Excuse me. So that's pretty much it. I did want to get into real quick. I find these needles with the large eye a bit easier for the joining, but these kind of needles seem to be a little bit easier with the bend in them, the embroidery needles. The bent tips are a little easier for sewing on the faces and such, but that's a preference thing. So you can use whatever you like. My other last tip, some of those, the ready-made projects will come usually with their own stuffing. I think this was from a ready-made project kit. And that stuffing is the poly or fiber fill. But my pro tip is when you are done, when you are working on other projects and you cut the tail off your yarn after you've woven in your ends, there's always a piece left over. I save those little pieces from the joins from after weaving, especially the cotton, the kobu cotton, linen, bamboo, any of them. I save all of it. Or little tiny balls that you can't make anything really with and you don't know what to do with it. You can put it in here and break it up or split it apart and use it. Don't leave it in the ball, but you can break it up or unwind it and you can use it to stuff your projects with. They'll go in just fine and they're super soft and squishy, just like this stuff. And they're not going to cost you anymore. So they're economical too. And I love the idea of reusing things that would generally be thrown away. So for me, this is how I like to do it. I keep a little trash can near the chair where I crochet and knit. Excuse me, so that I can save them. There's no bag in it. There's no liner in it. It's never been used for anything else. It's got the little bucket that you can pull out. I just stuff it. And when it gets full, if I haven't used it for a filling or stuffing, I'll put that stuffing in a Ziploc bag and press the air out of it and store it. Because it really does come in handy if you don't have the fiber fill. The fiber fill, polyfill, whatever you call it, typically is sold in really large bags, or you can buy it now like this. You didn't used to be able to. And that's more than I'll ever need for projects like this because I don't tend to do them. However, I have made them in the past. I really do like the results. I love seeing the cool things you can make. My hands just aren't strong enough anymore to pull some of those stitches through. They start giving me trouble. So what I would suggest is if you are gonna start a new project, that is amigurumi or amigurumi. Again, I'm a terrible translationist. If you're going to do that, that's great. I think you should try. If you already crochet very tightly, it is really, really good for you. Just remember that to come back and check out these tips and tricks, you're going to definitely need to remember the magic ring or magic circle. And again, there are other videos about that. So I did a quick rundown. And you always increase by sixes. And usually you'll see it this way. A single crochet and then an increase. And an increase just means in the first stitch you put the single crochet. In the next you put 2. You're increasing by 2. And you'll have 6 extra each round. You'll increase by 6 each time. And then a decrease, might want to come back and check out the video again, is remember to go in through the front loop only of each of those 2 that you're going to decrease, and double, or it's kind of like a double crochet because you're going to yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through the last 2. So that's pretty much it. Again, you can use any yarn that they recommend. A lot of people recommend the 4-weight yarn for this. They find it easier to work with. But I literally made something in this exact yarn, which is a sport weight. And although it was a little tricky, I found it to be a little easier because it doesn't split like a 4-weight does. See that? The difference in the wind of it. There's more to wind here, and they split more when you're trying to do these tighter stitches. This one really didn't. And mercerized cotton is good because it doesn't really split, and it's soft. And that's another thing you want to consider is the softness of that yarn. If it's a little stuffy toy for one of your children or grandchildren or somebody that you love, you don't really want it to be scratchy and rough like maybe macrame yarn or the rope, or you can use that stuff. It's just probably not recommended. If you don't want them to, if you want them to like it, you want it to be soft. So that's my cautionary tale on that. And again, stitch markers, stitch markers, stitch markers. So I will put a list up of the things: tension, hook size, stitches being single crochet, working in continuous round, making sure that you're marking all of the markings that they tell you to stitch mark. They'll usually tell you to mark the first or the beginning stitch of each row. You can do that slide marker with the yarn and just pull it up each time. Or you can mark the first one, take it out, and when you make the next one, the next round, you mark that first one. Increases and decreases, back loop only, front loop only. These are the main things, and the needle join. Again, with the needle join, you can also look up another video on that if I didn't explain it in a way that you understand. But these are the basics of how and what you're going to need for these 3D stuffy projects. I hope you have a fantastic day. Please like, share, and subscribe if you found this content helpful at all. It really, really does help me out. And I'm also found on Facebook and Threads and Instagram under Create Love Arts. So please join me in all those places. I try to post different things as often as I can. And you also get updates on what's coming next on this channel. So I hope you have a fantastic day. Enjoy your newfound ideas and good luck. Thanks.